So my opinion of the seals is that they're like a countdown. They're marking the start of events that are leading to the return, leading to that transition from the kingdoms of this world becoming the kingdoms of our God and his Messiah. So let's look at Revelation 6, and this is verse 1 and 2. This talks about seal number 1. Now, when I saw the Lamb, and this is John speaking, the writer of the book of Revelation. Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and went out conquering and to conquer. So we have this imagery here that is a rider on a white horse. He has a bow. It's assumed that he has arrows because it doesn't mention anything about the arrows. And a crown was given to him. This crown is specifically a Stephanos crown because it's a victor's crown. And he went out conquering and to conquer. Now, if you look at this scripture and you just use common hermeneutics and try to define what this means based on what has been written before in the scripture, you're going to come to a completely different understanding than what I'm about to show you. But I think it's important to be aware of this anyway. The most common understanding of this, and I believe this is what you found when you were researching the seals, Christopher, is that this is either referring to the Antichrist or it's referring to Jesus because of the rider on the white horse. And a crown was given to him. I believe that's why people commonly think that this is Jesus, because it's a victor's crown that's given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. So the common, and this is the most popular interpretation of seal number 1, is that this is marking the return of Christ and that he's going forth to victory.
Yeah, it wasn't my assumption that it was the return of Christ. My understanding is this was the announcing the beast, the Antichrist, because generals and kings are the only ones in the early days that rode a white horse. So there was a lot of stuff that connected this being the Antichrist showing up on the scene to appear to bring peace, even though it's a fake peace. Yeah. But I'm following your logic, so I just wanted to inject my 2 cents on the traditional perspective.
And those are the 2 perspectives traditionally. And it's been that way for a long time. You know, scholars have gone back and forth on, is it the Antichrist? Is it Jesus? And, you know, they each have their reasons based on hermeneutics. Now, my argument with this is twofold. One, the information was sealed. So it's like that box. We don't know what it means until the box is opened and we see what's inside. So we can guess about what's in that box based on information that we can observe, but until it's opened, we don't know for sure. That's my first argument towards this. And the second thing is when you consider the context of what we just covered in Revelation 4, where John's perspective is looking, most likely looking down at the earth, seeing those constellations and seeing the eclipses, that being in the context of the heavenly context, looking up in the heavens, what I mean by that we should consider what could match this description. So let's get into that. On December 26, 2019, there was an eclipse in Sagittarius. Now, if you'll notice, Sagittarius is a man on a horse who has a bow, and the eclipse was right above his head. See that?
Yep.
And this was visible from Asia. I believe that this is marking the opening of seal number 1. So the rider on the white horse who's given a crown and a bow. And the reason I think that is because it was right underneath Aquila. So remember how I said John's perspective was basically looking at God's celestial clock. So these are when the living creatures say, "Come and see." So you can imagine if you're John looking down at the earth, and imagine Aquila there is talking to you and says, "Come and see." What does she say? She says, and I heard one of the living creatures saying with a voice of thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse. So come and see means you've got to go down around the planet to actually see the constellation, right? So it's actually calling him to change his perspective again. And
So
this is what's underneath Aquila. Does that make sense?
yeah, I'm trying to make the connection with, well, I see the bow, but the king that rides in on a white horse to
So
conquer.
remember, we've changed yeah. So remember what I said here. So the heavens and the inspired scripture both have the same author, right? So they're not going
Right.
to contradict each other.
Right.
But if you're only looking at one without the other, you're missing half of the puzzle.
Right.
So the one of the arguments that I hear is that because this is a victor's crown, it has to refer to somebody who's a victor. How else would you describe what that looks like, or what that looks like? That looks like a victor's crown to me. That looks like a crown of gold, right? I mean, it's something that actually matches that description. I believe it's figurative, and this is valid when you're looking at visions and dreams. Is there's often some ridiculous image that's given, like the sower and the seed. You know, when he's throwing seed on the ground, and then he's relating it later to the Son of Man. He's throwing seed, or he's not literally throwing seed, but he has to give some kind of mental imagery in order to understand the point that he's making. And I believe that's what this is. Revelation 6 is doing is some imagery had to be given in order to make this correlation.
Oh,
So you've got a rider on a horse. Go ahead.
There's a good comment. In Greek, the bow means toxin.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Wow. Which
Yeah.
would support what you're saying.
Yeah.
And yeah, we
Well,
definitely have to.
I haven't said it yet, but you've heard this before. I haven't said it yet, but you've heard this before. So this is a fact here. So this is something that anybody could verify, that there was an eclipse that happened in Sagittarius on this day. And it just so happens that it formed a crown above a constellation of a guy riding a horse with a bow. So it matches this description of a rider on a horse, arguably white horse. I believe the colors, I believe the horses and the colors of the horses are referring to spirits. I'm not going to get into that into this video because that's another deep subject concept. But
Right.
there's a scripture in Zechariah that talks about that gives a definition of the horses. But we'll save that for another video.
Yeah.
So this is a fact. This happened. Go ahead.
No. I mean, you're right. Well, your previous chart showed the seal opening, and the virus was on it, which is the reason I said what I said. Yeah, it's fine. It's important for everybody to understand that we're reading a translation, so a lot of the things that Watchful is talking about, he's looked at the Greek and Hebrew meanings behind this as well. So sometimes if the English translation doesn't line up, I even have to remind myself a lot to what the actual initial meaning was behind the scripture. Because it can be misleading if you're taking it literal based off the English translation, which is what I've done for years. So it is important to understand the context and the original native language of what it was wrote in. All right, continue.
Yeah, and imagery and metaphors and stuff like that. Like when it says the moon turned to blood, obviously it doesn't mean that it literally turns to blood. It's referring to a blood moon. We use figures of speech in our society all the time. When you say somebody's got a screw loose, they literally don't have a screw loose. It just means they're crazy, or they're being ridiculous. So we have an imagery. We have an image. We have an eclipse here. This is a fact that this happened. You can look it up. Happens to be a crown above a guy riding a horse with a bow. Now, what's really drives this home is what happened on this day. So let me get to it. So this is where it was visible from. So this red line right here is where the eclipse happened. So this is where Wuhan, China is. It's not specifically visible. It was slightly visible. It was visible this much. So when you, if for this is what they would have seen,
Yeah,
but
but
they would have seen it.
that's a lot more visible than from the States.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is I've been trying to see if location on Earth is relevant to these eclipses, and it's funny because they're always on the edges. You'll see this because I do this with all the seals that I have this information on. They follow a similar pattern as to where it's like on the where the event that matches the description happened is on the outskirts of the eclipses.
Hmm.
I don't know what that means. Okay, so this is a YouTube video of the literal eclipse that happened on December 26, 2019. So, I'm not just making this up.
Wow.
So this is, yep. So that is the actual eclipse in
Where
Sagittarius.
I wonder what the perspective was from this video.
Some of them actually say, I don't know if, because I've got a bunch of these to go through, a bunch of videos. Some of them actually say where they are,
There goes a plane.
but yeah,
Sorry,
but
squirrel.
I love seeing. It's one thing to say that an eclipse happened. It's another thing to say, here's the video of it actually happening. Now, I didn't watch this one. I watched the eclipse personally. No, I didn't watch this one personally. I knew that it happened. I did not know at the time that this was likely seal number 1.
So what's the
I
bow?
didn't find that out.
A good question in the chat. So someone asked, so what is the significance of the bow?
So here's what happened. So I'm going to get to that right now. So here's what happened on that day. How do I get it to go to the next slide? Oh, there's a little thing here.
Yeah, I want to say I have an answer for what the bow represents, especially without the arrows. And
Yeah.
watchful I answer this because it's on the edge of my tongue.
Yeah, we're going to get into that here soon. Is this the one of them screaming? I don't know if this is the one of them screaming. What's really interesting is I have one video where they're watching the eclipse and everybody's like screaming and freaking out. And it reminded me of the lightnings and thunders and voices being heard. I don't think this is it. I think this is just another eclipse. Okay, let's get into what happened on that day. Okay. Can you guys hear this?
No.
You can't hear that?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. All right, so I'm going to make this slideshow available so you guys can watch these videos for yourself. But what she's saying is that the reports of the coronavirus, they trace back to December. So so towards the end of December. So this is very likely seal number 1 being opened. Now it's different than the common teaching for seal number 1, right? Because when you just use hermeneutics, you think that it's going to be the Antichrist, which I could make a case that this could be associated with the Antichrist. You could still make the correlation that it has to do with the Antichrist. That maybe the devil being cast down to earth and knowing he has a short time is persecuting the saints, right?
Yeah, well, this is when everybody felt that shift. In this time period, December, January-ish, late 2019, early 2020 is when so many people have reported just everybody felt something change. And this is one of the driving factors for me that supports his theory is that something significant happened, something beyond just a normal perspective, because something shifted in the spirit. I know that much.
Yeah, definitely. So in this video, what it's showing is they revised. So the first death was in January or February, which this says February 6th. But the first case happened in December. And I used to have videos of that case, but I noticed that YouTube took them down. I have another timeline that I kept track of all these videos. Half of them got taken down by YouTube. But this one shows that it was revised to the first case happened in December. Which it's interesting that you have a sign in the heavens underneath Aquila, one of the living creatures, that is a rider on a horse who's given a crown and holding a bow, and that bow, the Greek word for that bow is toxon.
Yeah.
I know that a
Yeah.
lot of people make the so here's the thing about that though. A lot of people hear the word toxon and they think of the English word toxin.
Mm-hmm.
In the Greek, toxon simply means bent wood, bent
Hmm.
bow. But so I have to point that out because I'm a man of accuracy and data, and I don't want to mislead people thinking that the Greek word toxon is the same as the English word toxin.
Yeah.
But that's going to be important with seal number 2 because remember how I told you Ophiuchus was holding the Greek god of Slepios, the snake. The
Mm-hmm.
Greek god Asclepios is the god of toxinology and toxicology, which is
Interesting.
interesting to pay attention to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that we try to use some type of analogy or code word. Let's avoid actually naming that virus,
This.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because you know how they are.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't think they're cracking down as much as they used to. So that's kind of why I've been a little bit more liberal with it. They're cracking down on other words.
Well,
But you're
I
right.
watched
We should keep it to a minimum.
I watched someone report something today that a video that he had up for almost a year they took down today.
Oh, maybe they're cracking down again.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, point
It's
taken.
just better safe than sorry.
So so there's still something about that seal that we haven't really talked about, the going forth, conquering, and to conquer. My argument on this is that was a pandemic. That affected the entire world.
It did.
And my research into the horses, so the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the green horse, is it seems like they, whenever they're mentioned in the scripture, they have a global impact. I believe that's what it means when scripture uses horses and visions. It's telling you that there's a global impact. And the fact that you have a spirit, because I believe they're referring to spirits.
Possibly.
You have these spirits and you have this virus that affected the entire world. You could see how I could how one could consider that going forth, conquering, and to conquer.
You know, what's also interesting is those colors are associated with a certain nationality as well.
Hmm.
The red.
Yeah, we're not going to talk.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a video on the mark of the beast because I got a bunch of information on that too. I think we both do.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I was. My point was it was more based off another religion's country's colors, but we won't go into that on this one just because that's a whole can of worms.
Yep, that's a deep subject, just like this one.
Yeah.
Okay, so any questions before we move on to seal number 2?
Bueller? Anyone? Bueller? All right, continue.
The number 4 is about global impact, and there are 4 horses. Oh, that's a good point. One thing to pay attention to is there's only 4 living creatures mentioned. Even though there's 7 seals that are talked about, only 4 of them are associated with living creatures. And I think that's intentional. Also notice that the order of the living creatures seems to be, you'll notice as we get further into these seals that there's importance to the order given.
Hey folks, thanks for being here. Again, we really enjoy being with everybody. We go live every day except Friday night, Saturday night. Monday at noon, we go live with Dr. Sean Michael Greener. We appreciate everybody so much.